Welcome to the Outliers Inn, produced by the Operational Excellence Society and sponsored by Zonatech Consulting Group International, with your hosts, Joseph Paris and David Schneider. Welcome, everyone, to a very special episode of the Outliers Inn. I'm your host, JP, and with me is my co-host, Mule, and a very, very special guest, Antlerboy, one of our founding fathers. Antlerboy, if you might recollect, went on a journey, a walkabout, a dream walk back there in December of 2020, and through the good graces and happenstance and serendipity has been able to join us today. How you doing there, Antlerboy?
I'm a new man, JP.
Rejuvenated?
Something like that. Yeah, you can tell by my fresh looks, my skin. I have to say, on skin tone, I think you've been taking some tips from Mr. Trump there, haven't you, JP?
Well,
you're looking quite rosy today.
Well, it's actually because I had the good fortune of spending like 2.5 months in Florida on a project, and my inner genetics Italian came out in full force, and I was feeling pretty good about it.
Oh, that's great. Well, I've been spending my time mostly indoors, obviously notwithstanding the peyote and the ayahuasca ceremonies and the dream quest and all the rest of it, yes. Yeah. But I have a new mission, new focus. I'm damned if I know what it is yet, but I definitely have one. So I'm really pleased to be back. It's like the third Tappet brother just reappeared on Car Talk, isn't it?
Yeah, that's really great to have you back. I mean, the show hasn't been the same, without you. It's been actually quite better, but it hasn't been the same without you.
I see you made the move to video. You've upgraded your technology.
We did upgrade our technology, and so far you must have upgraded yours because your internet has been behaving quite well so far.
Believe it or not, yeah. Well, it seems to be working. But yesterday I had a hugely important kind of network meeting and learning community, and I lost not only my landline thanks to Virgin Media, but also then my 4G dropped and just everything crashed. So fingers crossed for today. Hopefully it's working today.
Well, it's really great
I have to
be
careful with my hand gestures because I have a new, I have an OBSBot, an AI computer-controlled webcam. Watch this. If I do this, yes, I'll zoom out and then zoom back in again, which is good because it hides my increasingly rotund figure, and it censors me in the screen. You see, so I can do quite strange Doctor Who style effects as I move around the screen.
The AI wasn't quite working well with that, but
I've ordered a novelty mute button because of all those problems. We've spent 18 months and we're still spending our time shouting, "You're on mute." So I've got one of those great big red and green things, like a recording studio, and you hit it with your hand when you go live, and it turns green, and then when you switch it off, it's red, just to stand there in front of you and show you that you're muted.
Well, we're working on a little bit of an internal project that, it's called Inspire Now Live, and I haven't told anybody about it. And okay. I'm not going to divulge any details right now.
Oh, spill! Come on.
Yeah,
come on. There is a fledgling of a website called inspirenow.live, and it might give you a little bit of a hint as to what might be forthcoming.
Now everybody's going to run off.
Right, everybody's like,
and not listen to the rest of this broadcast, silly. Right. So,
well, you know that broadcasting video is coming in a big way to LinkedIn.
I know this.
A certain mutual contact of ours is going big on it. So
yes, I
know that. Look forward to some great progress in that area.
Yes. That common connection, and I have been working very diligently on it.
Well, I look forward to the great unveiling.
Yes, yeah.
All this hidden stuff.
I'm sure it's going to be a little rocky at first.
Yeah, I think so.
It's inevitable, but we're slowly making some progress. What about you, Mule? What's going on with you? You were on a walkabout too. I saw some pictures on Facebook.
Yeah, over 5,000 miles behind the wheel of the van, and over 1,800 miles behind the handlebars of the motorcycle. hooked the trailer, threw the motorcycle on the trailer, hooked the trailer to the back of the transit van, and took off from Virginia and visited people on the way out to Utah, did a week's worth of work in Utah, rode the motorcycle all over the place in the Rocky Mountains, up to Great Falls, Montana for the BMW MOA rally, partied with 3,800 of my closest friends, and then rode back through all the back roads, back down to Salt Lake City, parked the bike back on the trailer, and then back home through a completely different route, and visited all sorts of people along the way. Last year I only got to do one real road tour, and that was going up to this alleged marketing meeting. And I rode the motorcycle for that, but it's typical for me to take a long distance motorcycle ride every summer. And I'll take 2 to 3 weeks to do it. But I decided that, my body has gotten to the point now where it's just not comfortable to sit on the motorcycle for 8,000 miles. So, so the van was very comfortable. I have my color from, my raccoon type color, because helmet and, this part of the face gets exposed to light, but this doesn't. And, but it was a great time. Saw quite a bit of really strange things to do with logistics and transportation, things that were going on. Had some conversations with some, senior executives at some of the major trucking companies along the way. That's how you get a lunch or a dinner, go visit them along the way. And I typically do that on these trips. Is I'll pick 2 or 3 of them that I'm going to visit and talk to. It's amazing what's been happening with their fleets, the challenges that they have, the capacity issues that are going on. There's not enough containers to fill on the ocean side, but there's not enough trailers on the domestic side here in the US to handle all the freight demand.
Here in the UK, we've got an enormous shortage of drivers. They're just relaxing
Yes.
the maximum hour requirement, or talking about it. So we're planning to have more tired truck drivers on the road.
Well,
and they're also shipping out drivers en masse, or potential drivers, to Ireland so they can be trained in an EU compliant state. So that's nice.
Yeah. Well, you kicked all the drivers out back to Romania and Poland and everywhere else, right?
Sadly, we did. One of my little highlights of one of the lockdown things was when we had Brexit and COVID all hitting at once, and we had that. It's still there, this enormous lorry park outside Kent, and all the associated problems of bringing a huge number of long distance truck drivers together and their vehicles. But there was a Polish driver who was photographed having his perfect European Polish breakfast, that he pulled out from all the trays underneath his trailer, with kind of eggs and ham and pickles, and he looked really happy and really cheerful about it. So we've done ourselves an enormous collective damage with all of that, but as a result, we're short of goods. The supermarket shelves are getting empty, and we're short of drivers.
And it's ricocheted throughout the US here. And the big problem that 3 of the carriers talked to me about was how their customers are using their trailers as warehouses, because they shifted and they had inventory that would have been for a different market. When they shifted their market, what they do with that packaging, for an example. And no, they put it in the trailers. And so here's these over 10 or 15 over the road trailers holding inventory instead of being out there moving freight. They all said the priority is what's been hitting them is the first is trailer capacity. And the second is being able to have tractors that are operating, because they couldn't get their replacements. They're constantly replacing tractors because they wear out. Well, they had tractors that just started to have more and more maintenance issue because they were carrying that tractor from year 6 to year 7 instead of replacing it at the end of year 5 or the end of year 6. And an amazing thing. There's these consultants that are out there that look at the tea leaves and go, well, we see that Class 8 truck sales are like 3 times what they were last year. And that anytime that we see that pattern, that means that there's an overcapacity in the network. And so, Mr. Shipper, you should be telling your carrier to lower the rate. And it is so freaking ridiculous because, wait a second, there were no tractor sales last year to compare against. And so, of course, it's like 2 to 3 times because they didn't do any replacement, for God's sakes. And just the ridiculousness of what these consultants are trying to sell these prospective clients.
And
I've
damn
had 2
consultants, man.
Those
I hate
damn
them.
consultants.
I hate those damn consultants.
But I had two of my clients call me up and go, "Hey, Dave, you were telling us that, you know, there's not going to be very much chance for us to negotiate better rates this year. But we have this other consultant telling us that, oh, it's a perfect time." And this is the story that they had told me. And I said, yeah, come on, you're smarter than that. And after a few moments, it was like, yeah, sheepishly. Yeah, I think I'm smarter than that too. Okay. But yeah, it's still a curious time as all the supply chains around the globe end up going through multiple whip effect. You know, the
convulsive. It's convulsions.
And it is. It's convulsions.
Yeah.
And you know, the folks that are logical, they've done their planning and know that all plans, you know, fall apart on first contact with the enemy. Those folks are going to figure it out. So anyway, that was my fun and adventure for the past 3.5 weeks.
Awesome. That's awesome. So, you know, that's a great segue into today's theme, by the way. You know, wacky projects. We've all been on them. We've all been on them. And, you know, we have to protect the names of the guilty, okay, to keep the lawyers off of our backs. Okay. So that's the only caveat. We can't name names.
Can we use pseudonyms?
We can use pseudonyms. like I used to work with a software company that I used to call Constant Aggravation, for instance.
Okay. Yes.
So yes. So yeah, we could use pseudonyms.
Okay.
So who wants to go first?
Oh.
I got one.
All right,
so
let's rock, Don. Let's rock.
Let's rock.
It's not something that was
necessary obfuscation, Don. No names.
Yeah. He was.
I got my hand
Kata,
up.
Mr. Kata.
Yeah. So Don the beer man is joining us here, and what wisdom you're going to share with us, Don?
This wasn't necessarily something that was on site or anything else like that. This was while we were traveling, but this was priceless. We went on this gig and we were on site for like 9 days. And out of those 9 days, we were able to get out and golf 7 of them. So this was a beautiful project. And on the last day, we decided to go up and stay at the airport. They had a hotel that was right there, and they just happened to have a golf course that was right there too. So we were shooting for 8 out of the 9 days on the links. Well, we go up to the front desk and we asked a young lady behind the desk who says, well, what's your rates? And the girl says, well, it's $99. Okay, well, all right. There's always negotiations that have to come into this. And we says, well, don't you have any better rates than that? And she goes, well, we have the golf package. And we just turn and look at each other and it's like, okay, you have our attention. And we go, what's that? And she goes, well, it's $50 and you get a free round of golf. And we just kind of look at each other and I'm just thinking in the back of my mind, I'm going, oh, Frank, don't just let it go. Let it go. And he looks at her and goes, well, why wouldn't anybody just get the golf package? And she just gets so indignant and looks at him and goes, well, maybe some people don't play golf. And I'm just, back of my mind going, just let it go, let it go. So needless to say, we took the golf package.
Yes,
yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. So
okay, that's mine. How's that for a warm up?
Well, that's a pretty good warm up.
It's wackier than mine.
Let's see. Peter hasn't joined us in a long time. So Peter, you're a bit long in the tooth there. You must have experienced at least one wacky project.
Most of my projects are deadly serious, as you would know. right? Because I live in the very serious world of continuous improvement, where nothing ever goes wrong and where everything always goes right. So
perfect.
I have very, very few wacky moments. I think most of them are to do with losing control when facilitating, I would say, is my absolute favorite. So I can remember once working in my GE days, working with a bunch of sales guys, because GE Capital had insisted that we put everybody through sales greenbelt training, right? Which is brilliantly well devised for a group of people who don't give a flying what's it for anything to do with any of this stuff. And worse than that, in a company which was incredibly successful, almost entirely Irish, which is a bit of a giveaway. And we're trying to run a session, and one of the things you're supposed to do is run an elevator speech. And we're now the worst possible thing you can do with any Irish company. We're between the end of the day and the pub, and nobody wants to play, and everybody wants to go to the pub. And it's getting more and more serious, and time's taking longer, and we can't get anywhere near the speech. So in the end, in absolute frustration, I kind of just launch at them and say, look, guys, for F's sake, put the effing stickies on the effing wall and we can all go home. And we finished our elevator speech in about 30 seconds flat. And we were in the pub with the Guinness about 20 seconds after it. And so that's typically my world. It may not be particularly wacky projects, but it's usually episodes in the midst of projects where you get the chance to laugh and you get the chance to break and do something a bit different, and it takes you further on. So I'm sorry if that's a little bit dull. But,
Well,
I don't have any massive failures to talk about. That's for sure.
Well, it doesn't have to be failure; it just has to be an oddity.
I have something that failures to talk about.
Okay.
When we originally talked about this, it was really the crazy crap that happens on projects, and so Pete, I think yours is a great example of, you get people that resist until you have the effing moment. Exactly. And after that effing moment, they get the message and they perform. And, putting the boot up somebody's butt, it's sometimes fun.
Yeah, that's fun. I also like it if sometimes when you're trying to have a discussion, you're trying to brainstorm ideas, and it's almost always the stupid idea that gets the thing that breaks the barrier and gets you through. And I remember once pre-mobile phone days when we were talking about a specific problem. We've been very, very successful in again, part of GE and vehicle leasing business. We've been very successful, but we were really struggling because when we needed executive decisions, we could never reach anybody. And it was mobile phones, and these people were having a very serious discussion about how we could do a better job of reaching people, scheduling stuff. And one of the guys said, well, look, why don't we put a bat signal on the roof? And why don't we beam it into the sky? And we'll say, David, phone the office, and that will get it done, right? And of course, everybody laughs, and everybody says, what a stupid idea. But the 20 seconds or so following that were all the best ideas that were all implementable. And you need that piece of nonsense sometimes just to break through, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Super. Very nice.
Super.
Very nice.
So
I'm going to give one. I'm going to give one now. The classic failure when I was learning to teach. I went on this learning to train. I went on this sort of train the trainers thing, and we had to do some silly assigned task for our kind of practical. So we had to lead people in some kind of an activity in the thing. And I drew out of the hat how to do some type of kind of kinesiology, which was this teaching thing of kind of like, it was like an NLP, but embodied. It was like programming yourself to achieve your aspirations. So I went through all the training and I said, so what we're going to do is we're going to march on the spot all together. And there was something like touch your elbow to your knee and touch your nose. And this programs your body. Complete nonsense, I'm sure. So the point was you have to choose something to chant, like, I earn £100,000 a year, I'm this and that. And this was all being observed and all being tested for how good a trainer I was. So all of this silly stuff, I got through it all without giggling and deadly serious and explaining it all. And then we all started marching on the spot and touching elbows to knees and all the rest. And over my shoulder, this guy who's 5'6", I hear him marching and chanting, "I'm 6'4", "I'm 6'4", "I'm 6'4", and that was his aspiration. That was how he was programming himself to what he was programming himself to achieve. But I hadn't quite got across the point of the exercise. I mean, I haven't seen him since. Maybe he's put on a growth spurt, personal growth,
Personal growth, right? Stephane, you have a wacky project you want to share?
Yeah, it's a wacky story, and it's coming from the cleaning industry.
The cleaning industry?
Yeah, because the cleaners, they tend to be timed. You have to do all this cleaning in a certain time because, of course, it's a business when you are not making a lot of money. So, of course, you have to make sure that people don't waste time. And to avoid waste this time, one of the techniques that the cleaners have developed is they put some of the supplies inside cubicles of toilets. Therefore, when they need some quick supply, they just need to walk to the toilets rather than walking to a room that the enterprise may have give them. But of course, the room they give them is always miles away. So to avoid walking back and forth for any sort of soap or device or toilet paper, they lock some into a cubicle and they close the cubicle. So here comes the story. So they say, "Oh, we need some supplies. So let's go into the toilets of the men's over there. There should be a cubicle with some stuff over there to get the supplies." And they walk into the room and say, "Is there anyone?" And it's linked to your story, JP. Just close the light and show to see if there is anyone in the room. Of course, no one showed. So you say, "Okay, this is empty." And there was a closed cubicle. So they say, "Okay, let's open that door." But it was locked from the inside, which is usual because you need a key. But they didn't have the key to open that cubicle. So they start, with their car keys just to move it and start banging a bit the door. And after something like 1 minute, they managed to open the door. And there was a man that was sitting on the toilet, so I'm having supplies over there. And the guy never said a word, and didn't realize it was inside. So you can imagine the shame when the door was open. Never realized.
So the guy didn't say a word? Was he blind?
Didn't say a word. And it's something like it took 1 minute to open the door, not a word, not something, and say, "Yeah, there's someone, stop it." What? No, nothing. It's just like,
that's crazy. That's crazy.
Maybe they'll go away. I'll just be quiet. Maybe they'll go away.
Don't provoke him.
So the new guy at the end there, Allan, how you doing there? You got a crazy story to share?
I've been sort of cooped up in Canada. They're not letting us travel. We have curfews that we got to be in the house at 8. So I don't really have any crazy or wacky work-related stories.
Man, I'll tell you what. I've been watching the Canadian news and the lockdown. They're not kidding up there. I mean, it's the most harsh I think I've heard of in the world is the lockdown protocols in Canada.
Well, Quebec in particular, they reacted really quickly and very strict. They were not fooling around, going back to probably March, and they let up for a couple weeks and then they shut her down again. They imposed an 8 p.m. curfew. And from what I understand, that was probably the only place in North America, and there may have been one or two in Europe, that actually had such a strict one. And the fine was $1,500. And basically you were allowed to walk your dog 1 kilometer away from your house after 8 p.m. And you had to have ID in case the cop stopped you. If you were driving after that, you had to have a letter that allowed you to be on the streets. It was, and I'm an older gentleman, so I'm usually asleep by 8 anyways, so it didn't bother me much. But sorry about that. But basically what it was really smart. because the people that were spreading it, and we were bad. We were the hot spot in Canada, and probably we ranked right up there with New York at that point based on general population. It was the young kids just running around. They didn't care, which is normal. We were all young kids and we didn't care. But it worked. And the funniest story that I heard out of that was this couple, because you could only walk, one person could walk their dog. This couple actually thought that they were going to be smart. So the gentleman put a collar around his neck and his wife leashed him up. Now, that may have just have been the fact that he was living out his kink, but they got him. And they fined him $1,500. I mean, they thought it was funny, but it was violation of the rules, and they fined him.
Law, I guess. Yeah.
Well, in America, all you had to do was identify as a dog, and you would have got away with it. It's funny that you mentioned it, because we had a colleague on a project in Florida who was from Montreal, and in order for him to go back, I think this was just in April or May of this year, he flew from Orlando to Albany, New York, rented a car from Albany, New York to Plattsburgh, took an Uber from Plattsburgh to the Canadian border, where he walked across the Canadian border, and one of his buddies picked him up on the Canadian side to take him to Montreal, where he could spend 10 days in quarantine.
Wow.
It's insane. And like, we all have our sort of, we'll call it picking pieces, but what I never figured out is that you weren't able to drive across the border into the US, but you were able to fly across the border, both in and out. So I couldn't figure it out. Now, what they did is, if you flew into Canada, they made you check into a hotel.
And charged you $1,000.
$2,000 exactly. They checked you in for 3 days, and then you had to quarantine. They were hoping on sort of keeping it controlled.
I often find that the land border is a rougher ride than the airports. First time I went into Serbia from Hungary, we got stopped in the middle of the night in a misty, cold station, taken off the train by these guards with dogs, and had our passports checked in the little kiosk. And I've never been searched so thoroughly as traveling from Oman to Abu Dhabi by coach. They're incredibly harsh on all kinds of drugs in those states, and we literally had off the coach, unload all the bags, go through the bags, check the seams, bring the dogs around. Whereas we'd flown into the airport, and you can fly from one state to the other with very little interference at all, as far as you can see.
It's the logic defied me. Although I have a friend, a very close friend of mine, that has a country home right across the border, and he hasn't been able to go there. Recently, he tried, and so the border guards kind of know that this is getting a little out of hand, and so the border guard actually said to my friend, he said, "You're going down to the States to visit an ailing relative, right?" And he goes, "Yeah," and they let him through. They're actually prompting you as to, they know how ridiculous this is at this point, because the guy hasn't been able to visit his home in 15 months, and who knows what plumbing is broken or anything. But I do have a Wacky project, and it has nothing to do with work. It's, as I had mentioned, I just became a grandfather, and because we can't go anywhere, my son was kind enough to allow us to go to his cottage in about an hour outside of Montreal. His home is on a lake, and my grandson had just been born. And the first things I said to my grandson, I held him at 3 weeks old, and I said to him, "I'm going to teach you how to catch frogs and snakes." And because mom and dad would be horrified by that one.
Of course.
So I walk out on the pier the first day, and I hear a plop, and I'm going, "Cool, there's frogs here." And then at night I hear a bullfrog going, so I'm going, "Okay, this is going to be cool." And I spent the next week literally walking down the lakefront property in up to about my waist with a rake in my hand, because I wanted to make my grandson a beach, and I wanted to make it beautiful for him to, yeah. So I literally was sitting there in thigh-high water, pulling out the bulrushes, pulling out the lily pads, and making it and cutting the grass down perfectly right to the earth, making sure the water was just perfect sand. And my son says to me, he goes, "Dad, don't, like, please," when I told him about this, he goes, "Please don't let the neighbors think you're that crazy old guy." I said, "Too late. They've already seen me in the lake raking it. I'm literally sitting there with a rake in my hand at my knees." Like, so, and that's really the only silliness that's gone on in my life. You know, I'm kind of locked in a little world where I live in a community that's 4 streets by 7 streets, and I walk my dog. I work from home. I walk my dog. No masks, no nothing. If I didn't have to go to a hardware store or anything, I wouldn't know that COVID even existed, or watch CNN for that matter. But that's the only thing really that's gone on in my life, is just raking the beach.
Well, I must admit, I had to look back a long way to find the Wacky projects. And one that always sticks in my memory is doing a quality review of a project that we'd set up in Armenia. And this was in the Armenian government, which led to all kinds of amusing things. You know, we had this little outpost in the Armenian government, and the guy in charge was quite a character, and had insisted on having a sit-down toilet installed, whereas they normally have the European-style squat toilets.
Yeah.
And they'd actually come and concreted it in just over the top of the squat toilet. But I was going out and doing these interviews, and Armenian is actually the language that they use in the first Borat movie, because the co-actor, the kind of agent or whatever he was, is actually an Armenian guy, and it's quite a beautiful language. But basically, the way it worked is that I had a translator all the time, and I was asking people if everything was going well, and these were you know, older workers trained in the Soviet time. So of course everything was going well. So I'd ask a question like, you know, so how are the info centers going? And you'd hear info controni, and they would just, and the answer would come back, everything is going well. The job passport is being implemented according to the scheme of work, and we are complying with all of our duties. And I was like, okay, so is there something that could be improved in the system that we implemented 6 months ago? They say, everything is working according to the set plan, and we are delivering according to the priorities. But you would see, as I pressed and pressed and pressed, the Armenian for yes is ha, and the for no is che. So you just get this stream of ha 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 che 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 che. And then as soon as we got into something, the plumbing interpreter would start arguing with the people. So I would ask this question, and there'd be this ha 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 che 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 che, and then this big interchange, and I'm just sitting here thinking, what are they actually talking about? I couldn't actually tell what the conversation was. So that was one of my more frustrating projects.
So the translator was going completely off script. That translator just took things into her own hands, and started to fight with the interviewees about what was what. And I could never get who said what out of it at the end. Okay, so
I have a great translation story. If you're interested.
Sure, Pete. Sure, Peter.
Fire away, Pete.
So one of my very best friends was a very senior policeman at Gatwick Airport in North Sussex, and he was asked. He ran security there, and he was asked to go to Moscow to explain to the Russians how they did airport security in Gatwick. So he gets flown to Moscow. He's in this massive auditorium. It's kind of, you know, imagine a major cinema, that sort of style, size theater. And in the front row, there's all these guys in really important looking uniforms with covered in gold and covered in all of those things that very senior people have. And they did their presentation, and it went down very well. And there was a very polite round of applause. And they said, right, are there any questions? And the most senior guy in the room stands up and he starts on a long, long, long question. And my friend is looking to the side at the translator and he knows something's wrong because his translator's looking very, very shifty. And after what seemed like many minutes, they turned to the translator and said, okay, what was it? And the translator said, the commandant needs to know, is it true that Benny Hill has died? and that was the one question in the whole conference. And then we went home.
That's hysterical. So I've got a very early, we'll call it a defining moment project to share. I started the company in 1985. And at first we assembled and sold IBM PC clones. And we could have been Dell, except that we made the strategic blunder of being formed in Endicott, New York, which was the birthplace of IBM. And everybody in the area owed their life directly or indirectly to IBM at this time. So, of course, my PCs didn't sell too well. There's another guy that did the same thing as me. And he referred me to a client that was about an hour away in Ithaca, New York. Now, why would he refer me to a client that he could satisfy just as easily as I could? But, you know, I'm young and impetuous and I could use the money. So I went to Ithaca and to a company called Palangeli Construction. Now, I could share this because it's actually he became one of my early mentors. But Palangeli, Italian name, he owned a construction company, heavy excavation and masonry with septic systems on the side. And he wants an IBM PC network or a PC network. And and he's got this chair, that I'm sitting in this little tiny chair, this low one, and he's, towering above me with the big leather high back chair. And he's got his knees and my knees are in his shins, and he's talking about what he wants to do. And he's having me write up the schema of how I'd approach it. And he wants me to give him a price. And my price is obviously a lot less than the local company that provides something similar, significantly lower. And I remember it was like $18,000. Okay, it's it's not a whole lot of money, but at that time it was all the money plus more that I had. So he takes me up to this job site and he shows me this big shovel. And he's not believing necessarily that I can do it for the price that I've quoted. And he says, "See that shovel? That shovel could dig a hole straight down 30 feet. And whatever I put at the bottom of the hole, only I can get out." And he looks at me and he says, "You sure this is all going to work?" And it's like, yeah. So we go back to his office. He says, "Okay, I'll give you the job." I said, "Well, I usually like to have a 50% down payment." And he says, "I'll pay you when you finish the job." And now I've never met this guy before this day, right? So I'm thinking, I'm driving home, this fucking guy's going to put me out of business. If he stiffs me, I'm done, and I'm like just all anxious and, should I do it or should I not do it? And it's like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. And so we did it and got the job done, finished it. It worked. We got paid. And then he took me under his wing. I mean, he introduced me to every business in Ithaca. I don't even know how many clients I got through this guy. And he was an early mentor on business, on how to do business. I'm forever grateful for him. But that first project, holy Jesus, the sphincter factor I had, it could have made a diamond. Put a coal up there and a week later you would have had a diamond.
That gives a new meaning. I was going to introduce a phrase that I've used, but that gives a new meaning to it. There's an expression I use for a certain type of projects that I call the elephant's graveyard or the consultant's graveyard. So typically I get brought in to do like a customer service strategy or something like that. This is one that I remember very well. And it's a small piece of work, but I'm about halfway through and I start to uncover that some consultants have been in quite recently to produce a customer service strategy. So I asked for a copy of it and I get a copy of that and I look at it and it's quite okay. It's not what I would do, but it's fairly decent. And then a couple of weeks later, I discover that just prior to that, somebody else had produced a customer service strategy for them. So it's like walking into this elephant's graveyard of all the bones sticking out of the sand, and thinking, they're consultants and all of their things are just rotting carcasses remaining. I'm a consultant, and it's like that horror movie moment, the Peter Sellers moment of the camera just zooms in on you thinking, I wonder what's going to happen to my work. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but just finding out that there's been this whole series of people treading the ground behind you.
So were you able to give them the right answer, the answer they were looking for?
I mean, they paid me.
They paid you and then went and hired somebody else.
I suspect so. I mean, the big problem was, in that case, they had a big strategic partner who many years later we were able to help them get rid of. But the main problems were with this strategic partner. And so everybody, I guess, was saying, you need to get rid of this strategic partner. And they were constantly going, not going to happen, not possible.
Yeah, not happening, not happening.
But they keep paying people to tell them the truth. And then, they can't handle the truth, as they say.
Yeah, the hardest thing to get a client to change is what their doctrine is. And that's a doctrine. I've got this strategic partner, and my doctrine is that I'm tied to the hip with this strategic partner. Well, getting them to change doctrine is very difficult. That's a truly come to Jesus moment that you have to have with them.
But there is that kind of organizational theater thing where they often want you to come in to make it look like they're trying to do something, and it really suits them to look like they're trying to do something and then not be able to do it. That's the whole kind of purpose of the exercise, which for outcome oriented people like us is very frustrating. When I was working for a big firm, we did a project which was measuring the administrative burden of all the non-tax legislation across the whole of the UK, and it cost 13.5 million or something like that, and it tied up everybody in the business. It alienated all of our government contacts. It pulled everybody off all of the other clients, but it was this enormous victory, and we were going to estimate it by doing thousands and thousands and thousands of interviews with farmers in fields, with people from all around the country about the admin burdens of legislation. So this isn't the compliance cost of legislation, and it's not the data storage, it's the administration that you have to enter into. And we had this big city law firm had gone through every bit of legislation and broken out the steps. Somebody had process mapped it. And we ended up, because we couldn't possibly do enough interviews in time, even though people did go out to farmers in fields, we ended up running these expert panels where we just brought in a bunch of 6 or 7 experts in a field and said, right, here's an admin burden in the legislation. We had these big folders. How much does this one cost? And they'd all go, 50p a time, 1,000 a head, so maybe for £500. You go, okay, great, next. And then we added it all up. It came to, I think, £6.4 billion. They announced that they were going to reduce it by a third. And then everybody went, great, job done. We can walk away. We can forget about it all now.
Of course.
Too funny. Of
course.
The most pointless thing.
Well, I think that we should be near wrapping it up. What do y'all think? It's been a little bit over an hour.
Well, it has been, but you guys got to talk about all sorts of projects, and I didn't get to say a single word about it.
Okay, well, geez, share.
Please. Okay, so I was letting everybody else go.
This is the last call.
The last call. So I'm starting my 40th, or have started my 40th, what I call womb to tomb distribution facility or logistics facility. This is where I start working with the client well before they realize that they need the building, all the way through to the building is done and we're operating. And so through many of these, I've had all sorts of crazy things that have happened in projects. One building, water got into the electrical switch gear and fried at 400 or better than 480 volts going in, but I have some 2000 amps, 2500 amps going in, and big, building lights, flickered, and there was this blue glow that came through the dock doors, and then the wall started to glow red, and there was this
aliens.
60 hertz. Now, this this facility was in Sedalia, Missouri, which is just down the road from Knob Noster, Missouri, which is the home of Whiteman Air Force Base. And at the time, Whiteman was a missile base. And half of the women, that most of the employees were women, but at least half the women were Air Force wives whose husbands were missile men. This is back in the 80s. We were still, standing on the other side of the Cold War. And all of these women completely freaked because this is it. They dropped it. We're nuked. It was guaranteed that it was going to be that way. But it literally burned a hole through the wall of the building before the circuit breakers at the substation finally kicked. So that thing cooked for almost a minute and a half. And it was strange. So that was an early experience with that stuff. But I did another project not too long ago where the way the building faced, and there was this great big effort that had to be done and had to be approved by the owner's priest. And the owner's priest came over from India and directed where a hole had to be dug, and this hole had to be a specific size and depth. And they had a ceremony and they put some stuff in this hole, and then they plowed it all over. It was like a $150,000 exercise to do this. And it was just for the good cheer, the good luck for the facility. And that's what they were planning, was a sacrifice, perhaps, for good luck for the building. And that was an interesting situation. And then having to design in a place for the owner to park his RV, that it was going to be off, out of sight, but he didn't want to spend a lot of money. And literally what we ended up doing was erecting a 15-foot wall that surrounded a dock door, and that he could park his RV in there. Nobody really, he thought nobody could tell that he had his RV in there. The secret was everybody in the place knew the RV was there. And in fact, some people were using that to shag.
Oh no. Oh no.
So
that's terrible.
And so out of, it seems like every project that I have, and I get called in to fix a lot of projects. I do have that reputation of when everything else has gone wrong, call in Dave, he'll figure it out. And I'll share this about two different organizations. One is a brown organization. They're a big brown organization. And I sat in a meeting watching these.
Space.
Yeah. I watched what happened to specifications on an equipment system change from one meeting to the next meeting to the next meeting to the next meeting, because there was this revolving door of 4 different managers that had competing goals. But we'd go through the specifications. Okay, that's good. And then now it's review the specifications, make sure we didn't miss anything. Different manager in the room, and so completely new set of specifications, and no, get rid of these other ones. This is what we need. And it kept going round and round and round until finally I went, let's go up a level and clear the air here. That was an interesting waste of 4 weeks. And then an organization that smiles from, A to Z. In their fulfillment centers, you could have, 8,000, 10,000 light fixtures, fluorescent light fixtures in these aisles. And they use a lot of energy. And those, so you use a sensor, occupancy sensor, and turn the lights on and off. Except the aux sensors that they had in their specification had a range of 65 feet. The aisles are 40 feet. And so every time somebody walked across a cross aisle, lights came on. And the thing that fluorescent lights hate the most is being turned on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off. And they couldn't understand why not only were their lights burning out
The
after
ballast.
400 out, but the ballast along with them. And when you have 8 to 10,000 light fixtures, and this happened not only in one new fulfillment center, it happened in like 4 or 5. And their MO is to turn around, and whoever was the contractor who put the lights in, oh no, it's a warranty claim. You put in faulty material, you put in faulty equipment. And this kept going on until one of the contractors asked me to come in and say, I'm not being a fall guy for this. And yeah, we had to kind of educate the Big River organization on how that had. But it was interesting to have those conversations with these people because they are very bright. But when they're trying to pull a fast one on you, whoa, they get really dumb really fast.
Amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
the things that, you don't think things all the way through, right?
Mhm.
The sensors.
Unattended consequences
Yeah.
are a result of not thinking through all of the possibilities.
Yeah.
And von Moltke, teaches us that
Yeah.
all plans disintegrate upon first contact with the
Yeah.
enemy. And then I switch over to Eisenhower, and Eisenhower says, plans are worthless, but planning is priceless. And so, on so many projects, the planning part has been so important to do, but execution of plan, that's always a challenge. And
but you have to just be able to
you have to move with the
move
changing
it, right.
conditions. You have
Right.
to be able to change with it. And by going through that planning process, you kind of think through, all right, if this happens, then this is what we do. If that happens, this is what we do. And it forces you to go through that. Be prepared.
But you're still not going to be able to capture everything. Something's
you
always
never do.
I mean,
You never do.
Who among us has ever worked on a project that was on time, on schedule, delivered 100% of the scope, and was on budget? Huh?
Every single one of our case studies.
Yeah, everyone. Every one of our case studies, right?
I have. There's been a few projects that, I beat schedule and budget, but it required some, no, we're not going to do that silliness. It required telling people we're not going to do that silly shit. And so, but
Well, I've never had one that the scope didn't change.
oh, they do.
Oh, yeah. Then how could it be on budget, right? I mean, the day you sign that contract, okay, this is what was supposed to happen, when it was supposed to happen, for how much. And 2 weeks later, you get the change notice, the next change notice. So, I've never seen a project, maybe cutting the grass, well, that never is on time because I'm always having a beer in between. You know what I mean?
Of course.
So speaking of beer, I think it's beer time, and
it is beer 30.
Should wrap up. I want to thank our guests here for joining us today. Stephane, it was great having you back. By the way, Stephane, are you guys out of lockdown there in France? I know it was tough there too.
Yeah, we are. Thanks. It's getting smoother and smoother by the day. The case went down, but they are ramping up now. Apparently, variant Delta is coming back. We'll see. But for the time being, is you can see the picture of the Tour de France that people are, almost like before, I will say, but maybe not yet totally. We'll see.
Well, Don has promised a gummy-bear beer for you, and I plan on personally taking a second bottle and delivering to you personally somewhere halfway between where you are and where I am, and we'll make sure we open it together.
You should have got the first one. The first one was 9% alcohol. This one's only 6.5.
Oh, baby gummy bears.
Baby beer.
That's about it. Yeah, really.
And
Just a little one.
Peter, great having you back to the end. It's been a long time, my friend.
Good to be back. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everyone. Really enjoyed it.
Same here, Pete.
You guys have wasted more than an hour of your precious lives. Never get them back. But that was really your choice, not mine. And Antlerboy, it was great having you back to the show after your sabbatical there.
Back in the bar.
Hopefully you'll rejoin us on occasion. It was really a breath of fresh air compared to my new co-host. Really appreciated it. So.
I should say so. Hey, Mule, you and me, we can make a podcast together.
Hey, we can do that and make fun of Joe. So
Benjamin, why don't you take us out of here?
Well, it's been a pleasure speaking to you all, and it only remains for me to say, don't drive like any of my brothers.
And don't drive like my brothers either.
No. Don't.
All right. Good night, everybody. You have been listening to another episode of the Outliers Inn with your hosts, Joseph Paris and David Schneider. This program is produced by the Operational Excellence Society and sponsored by Zonotech Consulting Group International.